true graveyard shift horror stories that made workers quit the graveyard shift is a special kind of lonely. It's a world where the only sounds are the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional chime of the front door, announcing the arrival of the strange, the tired, or the desperate. Most nights are dead quiet, just you and the clock. But for one clerk, that crushing silence was about to be broken by a customer who never spoke a word, and a series of terrifying, handwritten notes that would make him flee his job in the middle of the night and never look back. We'll call me Leo. For about 2 years, the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift at this stop and sip was my entire life. It wasn't anything special, but it was simple. The work was pretty mindless, restocking chips, wiping down the coffee station, mopping up whatever the last of the day crowd left behind. Mostly, I just watched the clock and listened to the rain patter against the big plate glass windows. The store was basically a glass box on a poorly lit corner. You had a quiet neighborhood street on one side and a 4-lane road that was a ghost town after midnight on the other. You got used to the feeling of being on display, you know. That isolation was just part of the deal. It was just me for 8 hours straight. A solo act in a theater with no audience. Or at least, that's what I thought. I never really felt unsafe, though. The regulars were a predictable bunch. Truckers grabbing coffee, nurses on their third shift buying snacks, the odd lost person looking for directions. The silence between us was comfortable. We all understood the weird hours we kept. That store, with its buzzing coolers and flickering lights, was my own boring little sanctuary. I knew every corner, every loose floor tile, every product on every shelf. It was boring, but it was a safe kind of boring. That was the illusion I was living in, and it was about to be torn apart, piece by piece. It was a Tuesday. A little after 2 a.m. rain was coming down so hard it made the streetlights outside look like blurry watercolors. The door chimed. I glanced up from my phone, expecting a trucker, but the guy who walked in was a total stranger. He was tall and stood unervingly still. He had on this dark, heavy coat that was way too warm for the weather. And the weirdest part was, it was completely dry. It was like the rain itself didn't dare touch him. He didn't browse. He moved with this weird, deliberate purpose. He walked straight to the cooler, grabbed a bottle of water, then went to the snack aisle and picked up a single, plain granola bar. He came up to the counter and set the items down without making a sound. "That'll be $3.50, I said. My own voice sounded way too loud in the silence. He didn't answer. He just stared at me. His eyes were wide, and he wasn't blinking. It was this intense, awful gaze, like he was looking right through me. He reached into his coat and pulled out a $5 bill, and with it, a small, neatly folded piece of paper. He slid them both across the counter. I took the money and gave him his change. He just ignored it. I paused for a second before I picked up the note. It felt weird, like I was breaking some kind of rule. I unfolded it. The handwriting was sharp and perfect, in this stark black ink. It was just 4 words. "I know you're alone." I felt my blood run cold. I looked up, but he was already heading for the door, his posture totally rigid. He didn't even look back. The bell chimed, and just like that, he was gone, swallowed up by the rain and the dark. I just stood there for what felt like forever, clutching that note, my heart hammering in my chest. It had to be a prank, right? Just some kids messing with the night guy. It had to be. I tossed the note in the trash, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me. The rest of that night, every shadow looked like it was moving, and every gust of wind sounded like somebody was walking outside. The next night, I told myself I'd overreacted, but I had this knot of dread sitting in my stomach. I couldn't stop watching the door, flinching every time a car drove by. And then, at 2:13 a.m. on the dot, the chime went off. He was back. Same dark coat, same creepy stillness. He did the exact same thing. One water, one granola bar. He put them on the counter and slid another folded note over with his money. My hand was actually shaking as I opened this one. This message was longer. Asterisk, you forgot to lock the stockroom door last night. You should be more careful. Asterisk. Real panic hit me. He was right. I'd been so shaken up after he left that I forgot to do my final check. The stockroom door, which led to this little windowless room and a back exit, had been unlocked all night long. Nobody could have known that. Nobody. Unless they'd stayed behind, watching me, long after I thought he was gone. The store didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a fishbowl, and I was the only thing swimming in it. He left just as silently as before. This time, I didn't throw the note away. I folded it up and jammed it in my pocket. The sharp edges of the paper felt like a razor against my leg. The thought of him out there, watching, noticing my tiny mistakes. It was terrifying. A random threat is one thing, but this was calculated. It felt personal, and that made it so much worse. These stories are a scary reminder of just how vulnerable you can be when you're just trying to make a living. It's the kind of fear that follows you home, long after your shift is over. If this story is getting under your skin, do us a favor and like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories. And hey, if you've ever had a terrifying experience on the job, one that made you question everything, share it in the comments. You'd be surprised how many of us have been there. On the third night, I was a total wreck. I hadn't slept. I just kept replaying everything in my head. The guy's blank face burned into my memory. I thought about calling my manager and saying I was sick. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to tell them? A guy is buying snacks and leaving me weird notes? They'd think I was crazy. So I went to work, feeling like I was walking to my own execution. I spent the first few hours of the shift jumping at every little sound, my eyes glued to the security monitor. The hours just dragged on. 1 a.m. came and went. Then 2 a.m. by 2:30, I let myself feel a tiny bit of hope. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe it was all over. At 2:41 a.m., the door chimed. My heart just dropped. He walked in. Water, granola bar, counter, note. It was the same routine, but my terror was off the charts. I could barely make myself touch the paper this time. When I finally got it open, the message just sucked the air right out of my lungs. I liked the song you were humming, the one about the shipwreck. I had been humming to myself, a nervous habit, maybe 10 minutes earlier. The radio was off. There was no one else in the store. There's no way he could have heard me from the street. He had to have been right outside the door, standing in the rain, just listening, waiting. My hands started shaking, so bad I couldn't stop them. I looked up at him, my mind just screaming. But this time was different. He didn't leave. He picked up his water and granola bar, walked over to the small, grimy two-person table by the window, and sat down. He was facing me, with his back to the street, and he just watched. He pulled out a little black notebook and a pen and started writing in it, looking up every so often to meet my eyes before going back to his notes. The entire world just shrank to the size of that store. There was me, him, and the crushing silence between us, broken only by the buzz of the coolers and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was trapped. He wasn't threatening me with a weapon. He was taking my sanity apart, piece by piece, and his patience was the scariest weapon of all. An hour went by, or maybe it was a whole lifetime. I hid behind the counter, pretending to wipe it down, trying not to look at him, but feeling his eyes on me like a physical weight. My mind was racing. Call the cops? He's just a customer. Make a run for it? The door was 20 feet away, but it felt like a million miles. Finally, he closed his notebook. He stood up, slowly, his movements still so calm and deliberate, it was sickening. He left the water and granola bar untouched on the table. He walked back to the counter, his face as blank as ever. He wasn't buying anything this time. He just reached into his coat and placed one last, folded note in front of me. My fingers felt numb as I reached for it. This was it. Whatever this sick game was, this was the end of it. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was the same, neat and precise. The message was a punch to the gut. Asterisk, the back door is unlocked. I already checked. Time to say hello properly. Asterisk. The second my brain processed those words, I heard it. A sound from behind me. A quiet but clear scratching noise coming from the stockroom door. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. It was pure animal instinct, screaming one thing in my head: run. I threw myself over the counter, my legs clumsy with terror. I didn't even glance at the man as I scrambled for the front door, my hands slipping on the handle. I burst out into the cold, rainy night, and I just ran. I ran with no direction, my lungs on fire, the sound of the store's chime echoing in my ears, like one last, mocking goodbye. Conclusion: I don't think I stopped running for 6 blocks. I finally collapsed behind a dumpster in some alley, gasping for air, completely soaked and shaking. I never went back to the store. About an hour later, I used a stranger's phone to call my manager and tell him I quit, right then and there. I didn't give a reason, how could I? I left my last paycheck there, my jacket, everything. I moved out of that town a few months later, but the memory of that silent man and his notes has never, ever left me. I never found out who he was, or what he really wanted. No police report was ever filed. Sometimes I wonder what I would have seen if I had turned around and opened that stockroom door. But mostly, I'm just damn grateful I didn't. That job taught me a terrifying lesson. You're never really alone, and sometimes the scariest threats are the ones that are never even spoken. What about you? What would you have done? Would you have waited to see what was behind that door?